So you just bought a brand new box of miniatures, perhaps maybe a Slaves of Darkness Start Collecting box, and you rush home, you rip off the plastic, you grab your paint, and you start slapping color all over it. Right? Wrong. You missed a critical step. Find out what that is. Hello, my hobby friends. My name is Jesse. I am That Tabletop Guy, and on this channel, I help people get more enjoyment from their miniature painting hobby. In this video, I'm going to show you how to properly prime your miniature so that your paint job is not only durable, but great looking. So we have to prime our miniatures because not all paints adhere to plastic the same way. And if we're painting resin, or if we're painting hard mold plastic, or if we're painting metal, the paint's going to react differently to those different surfaces. So priming gives us the consistent starting point for all of our paint jobs. So there are primarily three different ways you can prime a miniature. The easiest way is to grab a spray can of primer. You can either use miniature specific primers from Games Workshop, Vallejo, or Army Painter, or you can go to your local big box hardware store and pick up a can of spray primer there, probably for about 1/3 the cost. You can also use an airbrush if you have one, but I'm going to guess you probably don't, because an airbrush is kind of more of an advanced tool. I have one because I like priming my miniatures inside. That's what I got it for. But not every person's going to have that airbrush. You can also brush on primer. If you just get a jar of, say, Vallejo black or white primer, you can just put some of that in your wet palette, thin it just a little bit, and brush it on. Be careful not to obscure the details of your miniature, and it is just the same as painting your miniature that way. So now that we've covered the three basic methods of priming a miniature, let's talk about how do we actually do this. So for this demonstration, I'm going to show you how to use a can of spray primer. It's generally going to be the same with an airbrush, but just a little bit different setup because of it being a different tool and all that. The basic process is this. We're going to take our miniature, we're going to put it on a handle of some sort because A, you don't want to get primer all over your hands, and B, if you're holding onto the miniature, there's going to be voids where your fingers are actually touching the miniature that are not going to be primed, and that may carry through to the final paint job. So I like to use wooden paint stirring sticks and double-sided foam tape to put my miniatures on handles. I can fit about 4 to 6 miniatures depending on size on a single paint stick. The paint sticks are reusable, and the double-sided foam, it holds great and it's not too much of a pain to get off the miniature when I'm done. So now that we have our miniature mounted to a handle, it's time that we go outside of our spray can and our miniature and we prime it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to shake that can of spray primer for 2 minutes minimum. I usually set a timer on my iPhone for 2 minutes, and then I start shaking when that timer starts, and I don't stop shaking until the timer goes off. It's very important that we get that can well agitated so that the propellant, the medium, and the pigment all are homogeneous or evenly dispersed throughout the can. Once we finish shaking our spray can, we're going to then take our spray can, we're going to start with it pointed away from the miniature, start spraying, and then gently sweep it across the miniature in one smooth motion. And then we're going to release the top of the button to stop the spray. And we're going to repeat that gentle sweeping motion until we have a nice thin coat of primer all over the entire miniature. Depending on your primer, you may need multiple coats. Be sure to allow for plenty of drying time between coats. I typically allow for 72 hours between coats if I need to do multiple coats, or 72 hours of drying time before I start painting. So planning ahead is a good thing. Now that we covered the basic process, let's talk about some do's and some don'ts when it comes to priming. If you're using a spray can, do follow all directions and safety considerations on the can. The manufacturers know what they're talking about when it comes to their product. Follow the rules. Don't prime your miniatures inside with a spray can. You can do it with an airbrush with proper ventilation and respiration protection, but do not use spray primer inside. When you come into spray primer, do shake the can for the full 2 minutes. That is not negotiable. Don't just give it a couple of shakes and then start spraying. And when you're spray priming your mini, don't drown your miniature in primer. You don't want to see it pooling and running off your miniature. That's how you end up with things looking like melted crayons. When it comes to brush on primer, do thin it a little bit with just a touch of water, Not a lot, but enough to go on without obscuring details. Again, more thin coats are better than fewer thicker coats due to the considerations of clogging up details as well as brush strokes. If you leave a brush stroke in your brush on primer, that will create texture that will show through all the way to the final paint job. And there you have it. We've covered the entirety of the priming process. It's not a big scary process, and it's going to improve the quality of your print jobs to have a consistent starting point on all your miniatures. In a future video, I'll talk about an advanced priming process known as zenithal priming, which will have some other implications for how we paint, but for now, just go ahead and practice, get some minis, prime them, and get comfortable with using a spray can or primer, brushing on your primer, or if you really want to, go get that airbrush and look for an airbrush prime tutorial in the near future. Hope you got some value from this video. If you did, consider subscribing to help the channel out, and here is another video you might like just as much. I'll see you in the next one.